Hi there and welcome to Power Play. I'm Vashi Kapelus in Ottawa on this Wednesday. Tonight, a woman shot dead by an ICE agent.
Minnesotans, I say this, I feel your anger. I'm angry.
I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the out of Minneapolis.
Palpable anger from Minneapolis Mayor and Minnesota Governor Tim Walz after the fatal shooting of a woman by a U.S. immigration agent. We're going to bring you the latest on the situation there in just moments. Then, Western oil debate.
They understand that the only way they can move oil and generate revenue and not have economic collapse is if they cooperate and work with the United States.
American moves to take over Venezuelan oil production. Prompt debate on how to keep Canada's industry competitive. We've got Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe and BC Energy Minister Adrian Dix on their province's at times conflicting pitches to patch the problem. Then we're going to dig into the political stakes and issues at play with our front bench. Sharon Carr, Laura D'Angelo, Jamie Ellerton, and Sebastian Skamsky will all be here coming up a little bit later. First, though.
We have been warning for weeks that the Trump administration's dangerous, sensationalized operations are a threat to our public safety, that someone was going to get hurt. Just yesterday, I said exactly that. What we're seeing is the consequences of governance designed to generate fear, headlines, and conflict. It's governing by reality TV. And today that recklessness cost someone their life. To Minnesotans, I say this, I feel your anger. I'm angry. They want a show. We can't give it to them.
Minnesota Governor Tim Walz speaking after an ICE agent shot and killed a woman during an immigration crackdown. A warning, the images were caught on camera and contain content that some viewers may find disturbing. The incident happened in Minneapolis and left an unidentified 37-year-old woman dead. That shocking scene captured on video. The Department of Homeland Security confirming the woman was shot in her vehicle, alleging, though, that she tried to run over law enforcement officers. It claims a federal agent, fearing for his safety, opened fire.
It was an act of domestic terrorism. What happened was our ICE officers were out in an enforcement action. They got stuck in the snow because of the adverse weather that is in Minneapolis. They were attempting to push out their vehicle, and a woman attacked them and those surrounding them and attempted to run them over and ram them with her vehicle.
Now, the mayor of Minneapolis says that justification of self-defense cannot be supported.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get the out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
As you heard there, the mayor is now demanding that ICE agents leave the city. This shooting happened just 4 blocks away, from where George Floyd was killed by police in 2020. CTV News U.S. political analyst Eric Ham is with us live now to unpack some of the potential consequences of this. Eric, it's good to see you, though I wish it were under different circumstances. A lot to unpack here. The video itself is certainly, difficult to digest. But the reaction from the mayor in particular, I think, is what stood out after the release of that video. The language that he employed, the force with which he felt it necessary to react to the presence of ICE agents in his city. What was going through your head as you saw that unfold during that press conference today?
It's striking because now, once again, Minneapolis, Minnesota is now the tip of the spear, as we are seeing with now one person dead from many of these ICE raids that have been taking place all across the country, specifically in Democratic-led cities. And we have seen the pushback, the resistance, the protests and demonstrations, but now we're seeing an individual that was actually gunned down on the streets. And now the response from the administration, along with the fervor that we're seeing there, this could be a potential powder keg, and it will be interesting to see how the administration actually responds after this shooting took place.
Yeah, so far they have been pretty resolute that this was, as I mentioned, as the Department of Homeland Security and Kristi Noem said, they insist that this is an act of self-defense. It's difficult to digest that when you watch the video, but that is, in fact, their defense. The last thing I saw from the White House was the press secretary putting up a post, basically like a picture saying, "I stand with ICE." Our viewers right now are looking at pictures from the scene today, and in particular what you referenced, the response from people in the city, the protests that are taking place. We heard from the governor urging citizens of Minnesota to keep it as peaceful as possible. But what is your sense of the degree to which this could be, become even more heated?
We've seen this story before, and I think this is going to get much worse, not better. And one of the reasons for that is because we know that there is a large Somali population there, and the administration has been vilifying that community for weeks now. And now with the death of this woman, I think what we're going to see is more demonstrations, more protests, but more unfortunately, I think more National Guard, more of a police presence, particularly from the federal response on the ground, which could make the situation even more combustible.
Yeah, do you see any signs of any kind of wavering of the position around the National Guard, or more specifically in this case, ICE, for example, the presence of ICE, the need for ICE that the administration keeps talking about? Do you see any wavering of that position in the near future?
Considering the fact that we just heard from Kristi Noem, the Homeland Security Director, who actually said this was domestic terrorism, I think the answer is a resounding no, because, again, what we're seeing now is just more fanning of the flames, not necessarily a tamping down and trying to find calm or even a common ground. And I think this is going to just only fuel more of a military or police presence in more democratic cities, not less.
And just finally, if I could kind of circle back to where we started, it's those words from the mayor of Minneapolis, the language that he used. It has been interesting to watch a sort of lack of political pushback, even from Trump's opponents over the last number of months, as his, not just his rhetoric, but as his actions have scaled up. Do you foresee a change, like this could be emblematic of a change, a more pronounced change in the future?
That's a really good question, because we have seen Governor J.B. Pritzker of Illinois in the Midwest. We have seen the mayor of Chicago, Brandon Jackson, even Gavin Newsom in California, really pushing back on the National Guard and ICE in their communities, but nothing like what we saw from the mayor today. And it is, I think, an interesting question, particularly now that we're in a political climate with the midterm elections this year. You wonder if we're going to see more of that. One thing we know for sure, Minnesota does have a very liberal bent, and we know some of the lawmakers there do lean heavily Democratic. So I think they could actually follow the lead of the Minneapolis mayor and begin a process where they are pushing back. But are we going to see a massive response from Democrats? We have not seen it so far, and so I don't think it's going to be something that we will see beyond the words that we've already seen from people, notably Hakeem Jeffries and Chuck Schumer, leaders of both the respective House and Senate for the opposition.
Okay, I'll leave it on that note. Eric, thanks so much for your analysis tonight. Really appreciate it, as always.
Thank you.
That's Eric Ham, CTV's U.S. political analyst. We're going to continue to keep our eye on the situation in Minneapolis. As you heard Eric talk about, the situation is evolving. There is the prospect of additional protests. We'll keep our eye there. If anything happens, we'll share it with you. I'm going to take a quick commercial break. On the other end of that break, we're going to turn to some domestic news, though. Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe will be here to talk about his push for more Canadian oil heading to markets other than the U.S. Back in a moment.
We are in the midst right now and, in fact, about to execute on a deal to take all the oil. They have oil that is stuck in Venezuela. They can't move it because of our quarantine and because it's sanctioned. We are going to take between 30 and 50 million barrels of oil. We're going to sell it in the marketplace at market rates, not at the discounts Venezuela was getting. That money will then be handled in such a way that we will control how it is dispersed in a way that benefits the Venezuelan people, not corruption, not the regime. So we have a lot of leverage to move on the stabilization front. The second phase will be a phase that we call recovery, and that is ensuring that American, Western, and other companies have access to the Venezuelan market in a way that's fair.
Comments from U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio just hours after the American military seized 2 oil tankers linked to Venezuela, one of which is a Russian-flagged vessel. Rubio laying out the plan there as the U.S. seeks to move in and run oil production of the world's largest oil reserves, a potentially tectonic shift for the global energy industry that sparked angst here in Canada, as the U.S. is by far our largest export destination for a product that directly competes with Venezuelan oil. Premiers are now stepping up pressure to access new markets for Canadian crude, including Saskatchewan's Scott Moe. Hi, Premier. Pleasure to welcome you back to the program. Thank you so much for making the time.
Well, thank you, Bessie, and Happy New Year to you and all your listeners.
A Happy New Year to you as well, Premier, and all of your colleagues. I wanted to start off on the post this week from you online in response to essentially what's unfolded with Venezuela and Trump's desire to see more U.S. access to Venezuelan oil. From everything I've read, it's nowhere near a given that Venezuela will be able to increase its oil exports. Does it really make sense for Canada to pursue new policies or pipelines here to counter a threat that I can't really find a single credible expert say will definitely materialize?
Well, 3 things. One, there's some existing production from Venezuela. If that finds its way to the U.S. market, that's one thing. It could potentially displace Western Canadian oil. The second thing is, if there is investment, you could see increased not only export capacity for Venezuelan oil, but increased production as well. That could replace Western Canadian oil in the U.S. However, we also need to understand that, oil is sold in a global marketplace, and Canadian oil can be sold in the global marketplace as well. What's restricted that, and 95% of oil from our province goes to the U.S. because we've been restricted on our ability to actually get it to the West Coast or to a port of any kind. And so, the race is on, I think, definitely for Canada to expand our ability to get our products, all products, including oil, but other products as well, to global markets around the world, to ensure our port capacity, our rail capacity is operating at a level that the world can access the products that we are producing so that we can continue to secure our economic future as Canadians. So, there is a certain race, I think, that is on here now, and we're part of it.
I certainly understand your point about the race and the political and economic impetus to diversify markets, but does the business case exist? And I'll go back to my original question, which is, we don't know for sure what you described will materialize, but even beyond that, even if it does a bit, what that will do is add to already what is a supply glut that exists that's keeping the prices of oil at this point fairly depressed relative to where they could be. Does that not undermine the business case for an additional pipeline?
Well, the race is on anyway. We're already taking a discount on the oil that we're producing because we don't have that global market access, or other countries around the world don't have access to Western Canadian oil, and so we should be having this conversation. And then again, I say not just about oil, but about all of our port capacity. We see other investments being made not in Canada because of questions around whether it be our rail capacity or our port capacity. We need to have a very serious conversation about, having that port capacity, allowing the world to access our products so that we can continue to create wealth on the existing production and value that we have. But also, we want to increase the value of, in Saskatchewan, we not only want to increase our oil production, we want to increase potash, uranium, copper, all of those. So this is important for us as Canadians, and I would say, in a very uncertain trade world, we see things happening with the, the capture of President Maduro. It's of utmost importance that we move quickly to secure our economic future and secure the access that we have to those countries around the world.
Are you sure, though, that that's what's going to happen? And again, I take your point on wanting to make sure the markets have that access to Canada, but Ultimately, private companies are going to make those investment decisions. Is a private company going to decide to pursue the construction of a new pipeline when oil prices are depressed thanks to a supply glut? And isn't that something that should be a part of the debate that's taking place, and that you, for example, and Premier Smith neglect rather to incorporate into the arguments that you put forth for a pipeline?
Well, it seems that the United States of America and the president is interested in making that kind of an investment at these oil prices in Venezuela, when he already has that investment made accessing Canadian oil industries today. So the answer is yes. However, that's the second piece to the very serious conversation that we have to have as Canadians about determining and securing our economic future is alongside that port capacity. We need a regulatory environment that is going to allow that private equity, that private investment to flow. And I would say that over the course of the last decade, we haven't had that regulatory environment or even a hint of a collaborative conversation around it. But that seems to be changing. And I would point to the most recent MOU that was signed by Prime Minister Carney and Premier Smith. That's a positive step forward. Now we need to act on it. And in light of what's happened in the last week, I would say that we need to be serious about acting on it sooner rather than later.
I know that you're more politically aligned with one neighbor in Premier Smith, but Premier Eby has been a loud voice in all of this as well. I understand, like I said, the arguments you're putting forward for diversified markets. It obviously involves his province, though, so very specifically, if a pipeline goes to that coast, it will. He has expressed opposition to that. He says that the discussion about a pipeline that does not, to be clear, does not yet have a private proponent is threatening resource development that could greatly benefit BC and the rest of Canada in the form of LNG. Do you have some sympathy for that? That this kind of project that has yet to actually have a proponent is threatening ones that do?
I would say that, well, first, when it comes to whether or not a pipeline will be built, Premier Eby is a provincial premier and he can weigh in with his opinions or thoughts. But ultimately, the decision is the federal government's to make. But there's some work to be done in order for that to happen. There's some other opportunities, and I think Premier Eby has been in agreement with this as well. The short-term opportunity for us to increase that port capacity is to expand the capacity through TMX, the existing pipeline, and I think we should be looking at doing that sooner rather than later. Second to that, I think just today he mentioned there had some comments with respect to refining capacity. I agree with that. We should be trying to attract that investment, and the best way to do it is to restructure the environmental regulatory process that we have, both at provincial levels and in particular the federal level, to go out and shop for that kind of an investment. And I would, I would align with Premier Eby, and I'm sure other premiers would as well, in order for us to be able to do that. We haven't seen that type of a commitment by the previous prime minister, and we certainly haven't seen that type of a commitment to that regulatory realignment by NDP premiers, certainly in BC in the last while. But that's new and that's innovative, and I think we could look into that certainly, but it would take some regulatory work.
If in fact the pipeline does come to fruition to the West Coast, the primary customer, it's Asia, but it's really China, right? And we know that right now from what's gone on with TMX. The Prime Minister is making a trip to China next week, and I do want to ask you about that trip. First, though, I just want to ask you about, I understand, like I keep saying, the impetus for diversifying markets, but if we are diversifying from one unstable trading partner to another in China, is that really a recipe for economic success for Canada? Is that necessarily the right move?
Well, the Port of Vancouver, I think first and foremost is, yes, that's an access point to Asian markets and China, but it's also an access to all markets around the world. And that's important for us to remember and important for us to focus on is all countries around the world. Now, China is one of the largest economies, one of the highest populated countries. So it needs to be part of that conversation if we are going to diversify our trade in any way, but not just China. There's India, there's many other countries. Saskatchewan, our province, we sell products to over 160 countries each and every year, and that hasn't come easily. That's come with a lot of focus, a lot of effort, and a lot of work, not just by the government, but more importantly by the industries that are exporting those products. So it's not just about China, but China is definitely part of that conversation. And I, commend Prime Minister Carney, and we've been in discussions with him to some degree on this visit and engagement with China. As you know, I was there just over a month ago with Cody Blois, the parliamentary secretary. But I commend Prime Minister Carney not only for engaging with China, but for really raising the priority and the credibility of Canada in that world trade sphere, and focusing on trade in his conversations there. That being said, when tariffs come on with a country like China, that is an event. And we have some experience in removing those tariffs from Saskatchewan's perspective over the last number of decades. And that is more of a process. And so this visit, glad to see it, support it, but it's going to be part of a broader process on, how can we remove the tariffs on some of the products, namely canola for us in Saskatchewan, but also open up opportunities for additional trade with China beyond what we even do today. So good step.
But on that note, with great respect, I understand that you're getting access to Asia more largely, but China is, if we're looking to make a meaningful move away from the United States, the obvious choice to receive in particular our natural resources. And when you mention tariffs, those punishing canola tariffs, for example, they have not been hesitant before when they see a vulnerability in the trading relationship to utilize it, to weaponize it against us to achieve an objective. Is it a smart move to rely on them more?
Well, I think we have to look at not relying on China, but expanding some of our market diversification or some of what we sell today, and some of the increased value in production that we're going to produce tomorrow to a country like China. They are one of the largest economies in the world, and to ignore them, I think would be a tremendous error. So we are going to have to find a way to deal with China. We've been finding that way for decades now. From Saskatchewan's perspective, we're over $4 billion in exports that we send there each and every year. We've had a strong trading relationship, but it hasn't been without challenges. And at the root of the challenge that we have today is we have a president that's resetting trade relations with virtually every country all at the same time, and it's got direct and indirect consequences for Canadians and people that are working in Canadian industries. And the path through that is engagement. The path through that is exactly what we saw this morning, the announcement that the Prime Minister is going to be back in China, fostering and advancing that trade relationship with the country. We hope that there'd be tariffs, removed immediately. But as I say, history has said that the removal of those tariffs does take some time. The path to that removal is exactly what's happening right now. So sooner rather than later is the hope and the effort and the goal. And I think we are finding our way in that conversation from the talks that I've had with the Prime Minister's office and others.
And just one quick final question, a point of clarification. Do you expect those tariffs on canola to be removed during this trip, or do you think it'll come at a different or later time?
Yeah, I would hope they would be. It's my wish and my ask that they would be, not only on canola, but pulses, seafood, as well as pork. I don't know that that's realistic. That hasn't been our experience, in the last few times that we've had to deal with tariffs in China or India or anywhere. It is, like I say, more of a process than it is an event. But we have seen them removed virtually each and every time that they've been added. And the way that they're removed is through engagement, like what we're seeing right now by Prime Minister Carney and provinces like Saskatchewan as well. So we need to work together, and we need to work towards that common goal, which is, one, to have existing tariffs removed, and two, I would say, to advance additional opportunities to trade not only with China but many other countries around the world. And we see a renewed focus in that space, and it's about time, I tell you.
Okay, Premier, I'm going to leave it on that note. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Take care, Bessie.
And we're going to share some breaking news with you now. Former Deputy Prime Minister Chrystia Freeland has just announced she will officially resign her seat this Friday, after previously saying she would leave in the, quote, coming weeks following her appointment as an economic advisor to Ukraine's President Zelensky. Freeland writing in part moments ago on social media, "I have written to the Speaker to confirm that I will vacate my seat effective this Friday, January 9th. Going forward, I will continue to support and help build Canada in every way I can while championing the brave fight of the people of Ukraine, a cause I have been committed to my entire life." Our front bench is standing by in a few moments to talk about the fact that there is now a date and the possibility of that by-election or by-elections, as the Prime Minister referenced earlier this week. First, though, after a short break, we're going to get the other side of the argument around a new pipeline. BC's Energy Minister Adrian Dix is my next guest.
We need pipelines built to take Canadian energy through Canadian-made pipelines that will be made with Canadian steel at companies just like this one, so that we can get our product overseas to non-American markets. Imagine if we had another pipeline to the Pacific, we could move $30 billion of oil every single year. That's an extra roughly $1,400 per family in Canada, in extra economic output.
A chorus of calls from Conservative premiers and the federal leader of the Conservative Party, Pierre Poilievre, there for more pipeline capacity to send oil to Asia in light of the possibility of the U.S. gaining unfettered access to Venezuela's heavy crude. To get to Asia, that pipeline needs to go through B.C. to the province's coast. Adrian Dix is B.C.'s Minister of Energy. Hi, Minister Dix. Pleasure to welcome you back to the show. Thanks for making the time.
Great to be on the show. First pipeline interview of 2026.
First and likely not the last. I just spoke to Saskatchewan's Premier Scott Moe. He certainly articulates one view, and now, of course, we'd like the opportunity to examine your province's view. So on the subject of Venezuela and potential increased American access to heavy crude there, it isn't inconceivable that that means the U.S. will need less of Canada's heavy crude. Why does your government appear to be dismissive of Canada wanting to send more crude to different markets in Asia?
Well, first of all, we are sending it. The amount of crude that went from Alberta to BC has increased in the last few years by 300% because we built a pipeline, the TMX pipeline. It cost us $34 billion, the largest public subsidy for a program of its kind ever. So we own it. You and I and all the people watching us right now on TV own it. And there's a possibility to expand access through that pipeline. That's what everybody in the world is doing because it's so much less expensive. I think the events in Venezuela tell us, of course, that we have to build our economy here in BC and in Canada, and that's exactly what we're proposing to do. But to draw conclusions about the international oil market a few days after these extraordinary events is just grandstanding. What we need to do is have a serious discussion in this country and then get on with things. I'm in favor of that. But get on with things that make sense, that don't increase our cost, make us a high-cost producer that nobody wants to pay for except maybe taxpayers. That's the approach we're taking.
Does that not, though, diminish the economic impact of TMX? I take your point on the fact that that was taxpayer funded. So far in the discussion around the prospect of this pipeline, both the government of Alberta and the federal government have been explicit that the construction of the pipeline would have to be led by a private proponent. TMX adds up to 0.5% to our GDP as a country, across the country, not just for one province or one population of a province. It adds 0.5% on an annual basis. That's not nothing.
And we're not saying it's nothing. In fact, TMX has been built. We've said how much it's increased oil exports. A lot of it's to the United States still, but some of it, the other significant player is China with TMX. What I'm saying with respect to the TMX pipeline and what we've been very open to is the optimization of that pipeline at relatively low cost and not building taxpayer-funded projects. They say it won't be taxpayer-funded, but the fact is there is nobody who's going to pay as a shipper to ship on a pipeline at this cost, at this incremental cost. And it seems to me that the events around the world, whether they be in Venezuela or others, tell us we have to act efficiently and quickly. And certainly that's what optimization projects do, first of all. And secondly, and importantly, we've got to make sure that we're competitive internationally. And there's no argument here. And Vashi, what hasn't changed is there's still no proponent. There's only a political campaign, and so we have political grandstanding. And what we need is serious work done, and we in BC are doing serious work now on project after project after project that can help the economy now and build and diversify our exports in the future. LNG projects, mining projects, the North Coast Transmission Line. These are real projects with real investors. That's what we're focused on.
To be fair, though, has your government not engaged in some of that grandstanding as well, right? To portray this as sort of a zero-sum game, that if a new pipeline were to be constructed, it would be at the expense of other projects in your province, even though, as you just concede, that pipeline is nowhere near a reality, does not have private backing.
Well, it is, and it does damage the important consensus we have around other major projects. We've just basically completing phase 1 of LNG Canada 1. That's a $34 billion, $30 to $40 billion public investment. We have the Cedar LNG project, led by First Nations, the Haisla First Nation. We have the Silicium's LNG project, which is approaching a final investment decision, literally dozens of mining projects. And yes, it does. These debates do impact that. What we're saying on this project, which it's not grandstanding in the slightest. We would rather be talking about all our projects on Power Play and everywhere else. But people want to raise this subject, and they've got a $14 million fund for politics to support it in the province of Alberta. And when we're asked, we respond. But we want to be focused on projects such as renewable energy projects, where we're going to lead the world, we're going to lead Canada. We want to focus on projects like the North Coast Transmission Line that unlock mining in the northwest of BC, mining projects, LNG projects, et cetera. That's what we're focused on, and we're going to continue to do that work.
But there is no, because there isn't a proponent yet, we don't even know what the route would be. And the contention from your government, for example, is that these other projects are in jeopardy because of backlash from groups that, would be upset if the route went through where Northern Gateway, for example, was proposed to have gone through. First Nations groups, coastal First Nations groups, who we know their position, it's well established and understandably so. But that doesn't mean that that's for sure going to be the route, right? Like a private proponent could decide, hey, maybe there's a way we could go alongside TMX and twin that instead, and then you're not facing the same obstacles. And yet you're still, you and the Premier have been very quick to say like that additional capacity beyond optimization isn't necessary. How is that not some kind of political grandstanding?
You're making the argument for us. There's no route, right? There's no possible takers for this, right? People who will actually pay market price for the cost of an additional pipeline.
We don't know that.
It causes disruption. We surely do. Why isn't there a proponent? We should ask ourselves, why isn't there a proponent? Because there isn't that market there. In the case of TMX, the reason they're able to compete, and they're about 84% full now on TMX, the reason they're able to do that is essentially an $18 billion public subsidy, right? So you take that off the top and it becomes viable. This is a more difficult proposition, what we're talking about. TMX was a twinned pipeline, so you're twinning an existing route. Here you're talking about a greenfield pipeline, overturning a tanker ban, which for people on the West Coast is foundational, and in our view isn't going to happen. So we're making exactly your point. We are not grandstanding on this issue. Any day of the week, if we want to talk about all those other projects I mentioned that can actually happen, that actually have private sector investment, I'd be prepared to come on and talk about any of them all the time. So we're not interested in this discussion. This is a discussion that has been promoted elsewhere, and we wouldn't be asked about it. We wouldn't be even expressing our views about it if the pipeline didn't go across British Columbia, which obviously makes it our project too in a certain way. So that's why we're responding to media discussions about this and public discussions about this. But what we're focused on are all those projects I talk about that are real and that are going to happen, we believe, that need a little bit of support from the federal government, probably, in many cases, but sometimes not, and need regulatory support, and we're trying to drive them through, and that'll be good for our economy, good for Canadians. And
I will point out, we have spoken to the Premier about those projects. LNG has been a huge topic on this show, for a number of years. I guess and when I think about the major projects list, LNG at the top of both of those lists that have come out so far. And I understand your point that it's not like, all of a sudden BC wants to talk about pipelines all the time, but that is a national conversation thanks to the MOU that was signed. And right. The position seems to be almost zero sum from BC, right? Like it's either we get our LNG projects, which we believe have greater value, or this pipeline goes ahead. And I'm not sure that's actually realistic, hence why I push on the issue of grandstanding.
Not zero sum at all. There's no linkage. That's the conflation of real projects like LNG Canada 2, which is actually seeing a final investment decision. We know who the investors are. We know who the joint venture partners are. And we just built LNG 1, which is the largest private sector investment in Canada. You can't compare that to projects that don't exist. They're essentially political projects that drive a political message. So we're not linking them at all. We're saying that Canada needs to get things built now, and BC is going to lead the way because we've got the projects to do it. That's what we're saying. And with respect to zero sum, we've been, I think, open, and people have criticized it a bit for this, to, for example, optimization projects. We've been open to that, which actually directly involve British Columbia Hydro, and the people of BC. So when we talk about zero sum, we've been open on all those questions, and we're going to continue to be, because I strongly understand Alberta's need to advance its interest, and we're always open to engaging with them. I was in Calgary in December talking to the industry and met with provincial minister at that time, and we're going to continue to do that work. So I don't agree with that. I don't think it's a matter of zero sum. It's a matter of projects that are real and projects that are not.
So does that mean if this project does become real, let's say what you think is impossible does happen and a private proponent comes forward, you're willing to engage in a real discussion on that?
Well, that hasn't happened. So, you know, we get asked hypothetical questions about a project that, as you have said, has no route, no proponent, and no plan at the moment. And so we deal with things as they come forward, but we've expressed our view strongly on this proposal, and we proposed alternatives, which not everyone does all the time.
Okay, Minister, I'll leave it on that note. I'm out of time. I appreciate your time as always. Thank you so much.
Hey, it's great to be on the show. Happy New Year, if we're still saying that.
We are. Happy New Year to you as well, and to everyone out in BC. Thank you.
Right on.
All right, you've just heard two divergent provincial arguments on the other side of a very short break. We're going to dig into the federal political challenge with our front bench. Plus, we'll talk about that date that Chrystia Freeland has now announced for her official resignation. Laura D'Angelo, Jamie Ellerton, Sharon Carr, and Sebastian Skanski. There they are. They're back with me in just a moment. Welcome back to Power Play. We've got some developing news. Chrystia Freeland, former Deputy Prime Minister, is officially leaving, she says, now her seat, vacating her seat on Friday, after previously saying a few days ago that she would leave in the coming weeks following her appointment as an economic advisor to Ukraine's President Zelensky. Here's what Freeland wrote on social media not too long ago. I've written to the Speaker to confirm that I will vacate my seat effective this Friday, January 9th. Going forward, I will continue to support and help build Canada in every way I can while championing the brave fight of the people of Ukraine, a cause I have committed to my entire life. I am here with our front bench to talk a bit about that, plus what we've heard today on the program about oil. We've got CTV News political analyst Sharon Carr here. She's the former Deputy Chief of Staff to former Finance Minister Bill Morneau. Next to her is Sebastian Skanski, who was Director of Media Relations to Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre. Jamie Ellerton is with us. He's the principal at Kanaptis and worked for Minister Jason Kenney during the Harper government. And rounding us out this evening in studio, Laura D'Angelo is with Enterprise Canada and previously worked in Prime Minister Justin Trudeau's office. Hi, everybody. Hello. Nice to see you. We've got a lot to do and about 10 minutes to do it. A lot to talk about, I should say, in about 10 minutes to do it. Sharon, I'll start with you. The Freeland thing is not just as simple as her making that announcement. Of course, a few days ago, President Zelensky himself posted the announcement, and it took a long time that day for Ms. Freeland to then say, oh, I'm going to leave in the coming weeks. And in the interim, both the NDP and the Conservatives said, what the heck is going on? Like, how can you hold these two things at the same time, these two positions for different governments at the same time? What do you think of the way in which this all unfolded?
Well, to some of our viewers' surprise, I'll probably step out of line in terms of my liberal partisanship here. Listen, I think Chrystia Freeland is the right person for a role like this, but the way this was done was not sustainable for a news cycle to kind of die down. It was an odd comm strategy, it was an odd rollout, and I think it raised a lot of questions that even Liberals had around, you can't serve two countries at the same time in different ways. It's just, it might have been something the ethics commissioner said was fine because she wasn't being paid for it, but the optics and the perception were not great, and I know she said it would be coming weeks, and there was a lot of talk, maybe it would be until after the budget, but it wasn't sustainable for her to stay and for this to be a constant talking point for opposition leaders. So I'm a bit flabbergasted about the comms rollout on this on her part, but I think that it was the right thing to do and it had to be done.
Sebastian, what's your take on how it all went down?
We have to applaud Ms. Freeland on yet another spectacular and disastrous exit. Of course, we can't forget how it is that she left her role as finance minister back under Justin Trudeau. I think obviously there are giant ethical red flags here. anyone with a half-functioning brain and a set of eyes can say that this was obviously a conflict of interest and it is absurd. And I think a very particular brand of liberal arrogance to suggest that you can you take money from the taxpayer of Canada, where you sit and supposedly represent the constituents in their parliament while advising a foreign country. So I'm glad this is over. I'm happy to see Ms. Freeland exit politics and enter the political fray in a different country, and just glad that we're done with this for now.
She insists that, and sort of intimates this in the statement, and also people associated with her were saying it a few days ago. It's unpaid and it's not full time. But to your point, it is advising a foreign government in an official capacity. She also says she checked with the ethics commissioner frequently during this whole process. But obviously, sometimes, as we've learned over the past 10 years, Laura, that doesn't necessarily mean the public perception of what's gone down, even if the ethics commissioner says is okay, it is necessarily the same thing. More broadly speaking, this opens up this seat, right, which I don't think anyone in the Liberal Party is concerned will be lost to another party. But there could be others. There's a ton of speculation. We've said it many times on the show. Bill Blair, Jonathan Wilkinson. Do you expect, more of this?
I think there might be more. I mean, it's unclear right now, but certainly the speculation sort of in Liberal land at this point isn't about, will they win the seat or not? It's who's getting placed there, right? Who gets University of Rosedale? Who's going to be the big name, likely, that's parachuted in, although it will be an open nomination like it always is. And so when you pair that with all of the speculation of will there be floor crossers, will there be more by-elections that give Prime Minister Carney the chance to get a majority, you do have to start wondering if the Prime Minister's office is asking other MPs whether it's their time or not to, again, open up the world, of the House of Commons for some more big-name candidates for them.
Yeah, it does feel like there's more to come, not just in this arena, but they keep speculating about floor crossers, all that stuff. And what does seem clear, Jamie, is that we were very, very focused on one MP making the difference for the majority, and everything being just moments away. It might be a bit more complicated.
Yeah, I think in terms of other people leaving, I think it's quite likely. I think when you look at the reality of just the calendar, the summer and kind of the holidays, early January, tend to be the two windows when people decide that they want to change after doing something for a while and move on. I think the Chrystia Freeland seat is a safe Liberal seat. Maybe front bench panelist, CTV analyst Sharon Corr knows Toronto Centre quite well, having run Evan Sullivan's campaign last time around, will declare her candidacy and try to be the next finance minister herself rather than just having worked for one. I think there's going to be a lot of moves on this. I think the instability of kind of what you're seeing in caucuses right now is going to continue to pump. And on the Freeland aspect of this, the fact that somebody who's been at this for so long did this so sloppily really just makes you scratch your head, and I think does show the kind of Liberal entitlement of like the rules don't apply to me, they're for you kind of a sentiment that runs in so much of Ottawa.
Okay, let's make a drastic turn to the topic we've spent a bunch of the show speaking about, which is kind of this provincial divergence or political divergence when it comes to an extra pipeline. The discussion is back in the front pages and the headlines, Sharon, because of what's going on in Venezuela, because there's heavy crude there, and because the U.S. has clearly decided that that's their heavy crude for the taking. Your take on what that means politically here?
Absolutely. I'm going to deviate for 2 seconds and just let you and your viewers know both Sebastian and I are University of Rosedale residents, and we'll be running against each other.
I'm here for that competition.
Get the breaking banner up now.
Listen, so I was watching that interview that you just did before this, and I got to say I was a bit perplexed by the minister's commentary and views on what all of this means and pipelines in Canada in general. I think this is an important conversation. I think what happened in Venezuela is putting further emphasis on the importance of our energy sector here in Canada. Now, both Venezuela and Canada have similar bitumen, but not the same environments. Canadian oil is low carbon, low cost compared to Venezuela, where they don't have the same infrastructure, they don't have the same environmental regulations. And so there is an issue in terms of where is our market going to be? The U.S. is a market for us right now, but this is an opportunity for Canada to further dive into and for the government to further dive into what does it mean for pipelines. I don't think the comments made by the minister before this were very helpful from a unity perspective in doing what's best for the country. We have product in the ground that needs to get out of the ground and to markets, and it's not going to happen by itself. So I do think this further emphasizes the entire discussion.
I'm a bit crunched for time. I apologize, and I want to get the last three comments in. Sebastian, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, largely echoing what Sharon said. I think that there's a significant challenge for us now as a country because we're seeing so much of that Venezuelan oil come online. And I think Liberals and Prime Minister Carney, if there's ever a hinge moment, it is this. Like, let's now realize that there's serious competition for us, that we need to actually seek out other markets and that we need to build this pipeline. And for Mark Carney to do the thing that he ought to do, get out of the way, repeal those laws and regulations that are preventing this, and actually build at those unimaginable speeds so we can get our product to other markets.
Laura?
The situation in Venezuela is giving Prime Minister Carney more social license for the MOU with Alberta. And I think it's pretty safe to say that right now Canadians are scared. Even if there's a debate about how long it could take for this Venezuelan oil industry to come back online and actually be competitive again, Canadians are scared about that. And so I think that there are a lot of people in Canada, even those who are very pro-decarbonization and pro-moving off of oil, who now understand the importance of finding a way to get Canadian crude to markets other than the U.S.
The last word, Jamie, to you.
Yeah, listen, Vashti, if you look at the public polling on this, 2/3 of Canadians in pretty much every region of the country is in favor of getting this done. The MOU is a great first step. I was in Alberta a bit over the holidays, and people who generally vote Conservative think it's a good thing and are glad to see the feds and the province actually working together to move it done. The sooner they can make this a tangible proposal that further serves as a rallying cry to get all Canadians on side, including the Federal Conservative Caucus the better news that'll be for Canadians.
Okay, on that very concise note, I will put an end to this. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it. We look forward to your co-announcement in University Rosedale, Sharon and Sebastian. Sharon Carr, Sebastian Skamsky, Jamie Ellerton, and Laura D'Angelo. Our front bench. We don't want to lose you guys as panelists. Come on. We're back in a moment with more Power Play. Stay right there.
They are already trying to spin this as an action of self-defense. Having seen the video of myself, I want to tell everybody directly, that is I have a message for ICE. To ICE, get out of Minneapolis. We do not want you here. Your stated reason for being in this city is to create some kind of safety, and you are doing exactly the opposite.
Heated comments there from the mayor of Minneapolis. He was responding to the shooting and killing of a 37-year-old woman in his city by a federal immigration agent. The Department of Homeland Security insists that came as a move of self-defense. But as you heard there, state-level officials and law enforcement at the state level contend that that's not the case. I want to show you right now a live shot of a vigil in that city. You can see throughout the day there were actually a number of protests growing about what has unfolded and the presence of immigration officials or immigration law enforcement, ICE, otherwise known as ICE there. And those protests and the vigils continue at this hour. We'll have full coverage tonight on CTV News Channel. I will leave Power Play there. Thank you very much for watching.